Drawing is nothing if not a skill of perception. Trying to see the world around us through the eyes of a painter is basically an attempt to organize the vast amount of visual information we receive into just a few compressed groups of manageable information. We do that by setting up goals with which we prioritize what we are seeing and helps us ask the right questions. Some of the information we see will be crucial, and some might be completely useless to us depending on the goal we have set. A useful distinction to make for starters is between observation and conception. These two ways of seeing the world may be different but not divorced from each other. Some schools have the tendency to favor one over the other sometimes, but I believe there are parts of the same thing and very beneficial to get familiar with both. By observation, I'm referring to what we're doing when trying to represent what's in front of us as we see it on a canvas or any other surface. When drawing from observation, we're concerned mostly with the two-dimensional shapes we see in the three-dimensional world. Since our goal in this case is to project on a 2D surface an image that we're seeing live in 3D, we don't really need any information concerning depth. All we need is shapes. When we measure stuff while drawing from life, we're concerned exclusively with just the X and Y axis. That's why drawing from a photo reference seems a bit easier than drawing from life. Our subject is already projected on a 2D surface, so our brain has a bit less work to do. On the other hand, conception is sort of the opposite. It stems from observation, since it remains our initial source of information, but it takes on a different path. Our starting point is now a blank 2D surface in which we are trying to think in 3D space. Shapes become objects in our minds as we try to invent our subject from scratch. Observation becomes a tool for understanding why things look the way they do in the physical world, and not just for transferring shapes. We are breaking down the information we see structurally into simple building blocks. That makes it possible for us to recreate our subject from memory or use these blocks to build something completely new. So, to recap, with observation, we're concerned with just the 2D shapes we see in 3D space. These shapes are all we're looking for. The more of them we transfer accurately onto our paper, the closer we get to a realistic representation. With conception, we put our effort more on understanding what we are seeing and how it relates to 3D space. We're trying to perceive structure. That allows us to tear down what we see into objects with actual volume that we can manipulate in space. It may be harder to represent reality since we don't have the form and light shapes right there in front of us, but it gives us the freedom to invent things without a need for reference. Keep in mind that this is not a comparison. Both approaches are great tools, and there are countless examples of their application and in varying degrees depending on what they were aiming for. These two ways of seeing complete each other, and the greatest advantage in becoming familiar with both is because it makes us better designers. Design is deeply rooted in our brain's capacity for abstract thought and the ability to compress information. Being able to isolate just the information we need out of the enormous and constant stream of information our brain receives has been crucial for our own survival. Strangely enough, it's a big part of creativity as well, and that's because they both involve problem solving. Design is the compression of information towards a specific goal. It's what turns this into this, or this into this, or even this into this. The list is practically endless, and it's not limited in just describing the physical world. Design can also enter the abstract plane of ideas through symbols. Even the written word could be regarded as the product of the design process. The constant compressing of information in our effort to optimize its function drove things into an extreme form of abstraction. It's always the same process. The goal establishes the right questions which lead us to our design decisions. And by design, I'm not talking just about the visual mediums here, Writing a novel requires good design. Including every possible information you can think of about your story, for example, is probably not going to make for a very engaging reading. That's because it lacks purpose. Even telling a joke to your friends requires some kind of planning. If you include more than you need for the punchline to work, the joke usually falls apart. Same goes for composing music. The parts you leave out are equally important. That's because design has to do with the relations between the elements as much as the elements themselves. And the most important thing in relationships is contrast. Which brings us to another great concept that we will explore in another video all on its own. Until then, take care and thank you for watching.